Tonight, keep calm and carry on. The British response to market turmoil. The UK pledges a calm and considered approach to dealing with the fallout from Trump's tariffs. Keir Starmer says we shouldn't jump in with both feet to retaliate. Sky News catches up with the leader of Birmingham City Council as talks to end the city's bin strike collapse. Growing calls for the UK to introduce special rules for young drivers. We report from Canada, where tougher laws have seen fatalities fall. All that and more with Jim Murphy and Gwen Towler, who'll be with us for the next hour. It's Tuesday. I'm Ali Fortescue, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Politics Hub. Well, MPs have left Westminster for the Easter recess, but as we all grapple with a shifting world order, politics is not taking a break. Tonight, the fallout of Donald Trump's tariffs continues. China vows to fight till the end. If no one backs down, from tomorrow, the US will charge more than 100% on goods from China. Trade wars, strong men, what does it all mean for us here in the UK? Well, to be honest, the answer is no one really knows what's ahead, and that includes the Chancellor.
I know too that this is an anxious time for families who are worried about the cost of living. We have your backs. And British businesses who are worried about what a changing world will mean for them, we have your backs too.
But can Rachel Reeves really protect people, and with what money? Growth is what the government have been banking on, and any growth looks on shaky ground right now. Something is going to have to give. As for Keir Starmer, well, today he was in front of the Liaison committee. That might not sound wildly exciting, but this is a notoriously brutal grilling for any Prime Minister on a whole range of subjects by MPs. I just want to remind you of Boris Johnson's appearance before that committee in 2022.
You've had more resignations since any Prime Minister since 1932. Michael Gove has told you to go. The charade's up, the game's up, really. Will you be Prime Minister tomorrow?
Of course, Mr McNeill. But
next week?
I'm here to, rather than giving any running commentary on my own career, I'm here to talk about the government. I'm here to talk about what the government is doing. And,
okay.
And that is, so that's what I was telling Stephen. And we're doing a lot.
You might remember the very next day Boris Johnson resigned as Prime Minister. Well, Keir Starmer might have got away relatively unscathed today, but you do get a sense of the mood listening to those MPs' questions. The main takeaway today, what comes next, is not necessarily in the Prime Minister's control. Something might well have to give for all the sums to add up. Well, earlier I spoke to the Health Minister, Steven Kinnock. Steven Kinnock, thanks so much for talking to us today. I want to start with, we'll move on to your brief health in a moment, but by the kind of global state of affairs that we've obviously been talking about. Prime Minister talking about global headwinds, the Health Secretary talking about an extremely turbulent backdrop. What's your assessment of the current backdrop?
It is very turbulent. Nobody benefits from a trade war. We live in an incredibly deeply integrated global economy with very integrated supply chains and hugely interdependent commercial relationships. So nobody benefits from a trade war. We are seeing a Prime Minister who's really showing leadership. He is engaging with Donald Trump and seeking to negotiate the best possible deal that we can in terms of our economic prosperity. He's also rebuilding all the bridges that were burned by previous Conservative governments in terms of our relationship with the European Union. And we're also developing an industrial strategy to help Britain stand firmly on its own 2 feet, investing in our own industries, boosting domestic demand, investing in skills, in infrastructure, rebuilding our manufacturing sector. So I think the combination of those 3 things is going to help us to weather the storm, but we certainly are in a storm.
I mean, you talk about a storm, but it feels like ministers are at pains to say the words Donald Trump.
Well, look, you know, the United States is the most powerful economy in the world, and when the President of the United States makes radical changes to the way that that country trades, it's going to have a big knock-on impact right across the globe. Whether you're China or the United Kingdom, it's going to have an impact.
Do you think his tariffs plan is going to plan?
I think that he has clearly taken a view about what needs to change in terms of America's trading relationships. We have seen a massive impact in terms of the stock exchange. I think something like $9 trillion wiped off the value of stock exchanges around the world. I mean, that is a big hit. I think we're clear that nobody benefits from a trade war, but it is the sovereign right of the President of the United States to make policy about his country's trading arrangements. It is now our job to respond to that, to stand up for the British national interest, to secure the best possible deal, to rebuild bridges with the European Union, and to develop our own industrial strategy. And that is what we're seeing with the leadership of this Prime Minister moving forward.
Rachel Reeves says, we've got your backs. What do you think she means by that?
I think she means that British workers are being buffeted by the winds of change. I mean, if you go back to the financial crash, you look at the massive impact of Brexit, now what's happening with Trump,
How can she
COVID.
have people's backs when there's not enough money to go around?
That is really about developing this industrial strategy. It is about saying, look, we've got a strong services sector, but there is a real problem for our manufacturing sector, which has decreased for decades in terms of its percentage share of GDP. We've got to invest in our manufacturing sector, start to rebuild it so that we can stand more firmly on our own two feet.
But seriously, though, where are you going to get that money from?
Well, I think there's growth in the economy. That is what we need to see moving
Trump's
forward.
tariffs look like they're going to have a bit of an impact on growth.
Yeah, it's not only about the money, though. It's also about the policies. I mean, look at what we've done with planning reform, and the OBR marked the impact of our planning reform as the biggest policy-related impact on growth, positive impact on growth that they've seen. So I think it's about unleashing the green energy and the manufacturing opportunities around that. My constituency sees a huge opportunity in the Celtic Sea for floating offshore wind, which could create upwards of 5,000 to 7,000 jobs. I mean, that's huge.
I get that, but, these things aren't free. And I guess, people want you to just be straight with them, that there are going to be difficult decisions ahead. We're entering the unknown. This is going to be difficult.
Of course. I mean, to govern is to choose. And when you are looking at a very turbulent global situation, you've got to be able to react and be quick on your feet. But I would also say that it's about partnership with the private sector. It's not just about coming back to government all the time and saying, what are you going to do about this? What are you going to do about that? We are working in partnership with the private sector to develop offshore and onshore wind, to develop solar. We've seen the greater flexibility the Prime Minister's given to the automotive sector in the announcements that were made yesterday. So we're responding to the global picture, but we're also not panicking.
OK, well, related to all this is British Steel. You've been a vocal advocate of British Steel. Of course, the old steel plant at Port Talbot is in your constituency. Is this a make or break week for steel making in Scunthorpe?
Well, I think that the government is engaged in negotiations with Xingye, the Chinese company that owns Scunthorpe. We have seen in Port Talbot a transition. We've moved away from blast furnace technology into electric arc furnace technology. I'm really pleased to say that we're going to see spades in the ground on that project in the summer. It's going to build one of the biggest electric arc furnaces in the world. It has been a challenging time, but there are real opportunities with the construction of the electric arc furnace and then moving forward into making the kind of steel that the market wants to buy. But for Scunthorpe, that clearly is a sensitive negotiation that's going on between the unions, led by Community Union, the Steelworkers Union, and the British government and Xingye. And I am hopeful that Xingye will see what has been delivered by this Labour government in Port Talbot and see that there are opportunities to move in terms of the way the steel that they make. But it has to be a bridge to the future, not a cliff edge. And that means looking at the proposals to keep the blast furnaces going for a period of time whilst in parallel investing in the construction of electric arc furnaces. That is the right way to go in Scunthorpe, and I hope that Xingye will engage constructively with our proposals.
Is nationalisation of British Steel on the table?
There are no plans to nationalise. I think it's much better for a steel plant in a highly competitive, fast-moving environment to be managed by experts in managing the steel industry and in managing the private sector. I don't think civil servants in Whitehall are best placed to make decisions about the corporate, the competitiveness of a corporation like a steel plant. It's a particular business that requires a lot of expertise and experience, and I'm not convinced that that expertise and experience exists in Whitehall.
Interesting, thank you. So we're rattling through, because I know you don't have that much time.
Sure.
I want to ask you about your brief, healthcare. We're looking at big job losses as part of reform. Is the Treasury going to fund those job losses?
Well, one thing that is not job losses is the announcement we've made today about 1,500 new GPs. When we came into office...
OK, we'll come on to that in a minute, but first, can we just answer the question?
We're coming forward with a reform plan that's partly about the abolition of NHS England and merging it into the Department for Health and Social Care. There will be some restructuring as a result of that, and there will be funds being made available to support with voluntary redundancy of people in the civil service and in the NHS England setup as a result of that. And, of course, we are bringing forward a workforce plan in the summer that will look at the whole picture and will say, where does our NHS and care system need to be in 2035? We've got an ambitious 10-year plan.
And lastly, sorry it's taken me a long time to get to what you want to talk about today. Tell me a little bit about how many GPs you're recruiting, because there's been a bit of a mismatch in terms of the number of GPs. The BMA says only 180 full-time posts.
They can't be saying that. I think they may be saying...
Sorry, not 180, 850.
Yes,
I misread
850, yeah. So look, when we came into office in July, we inherited this crazy situation where there was quite a healthy pipeline of newly qualified GPs coming through their training, but the practices were actually blocked from hiring them because the previous government, in his wisdom, said that there was a hiring scheme, but it could only be for non-GPs, so practice nurses, physician associates, etc. We immediately bust that red tape. We said, absolutely, this should be about hiring GPs. We reprioritised budgets across my portfolio, found 82 million for this and set them a target. We said by the 1st of April, we want to see 1,000 new GPs. I am delighted that today we've smashed that target, 1,500 new GPs. They are going to be coming in and helping to end the 8 a.m. scramble, bringing back the family doctor. There's still a long way to go, but I think this is a major step in the right direction in terms of improving access for patients and the outcomes that they get in terms of their own health. So a lot more work to do, but this is absolutely a big step in the right direction.
OK, Steven Kinnock, thanks so much for talking to us on the Politics Hub this evening.
Thanks very much.
Well, as you can see, John Craig is with me now because, naturally, the subject of US tariffs and the fallout from all that here in the UK has featured in the Liaison committee today, and John is going to run us through this. I was saying in the intro, you know, these Liaison committee grillings can be quite brutal. What were the main takeaways today?
Well, I wouldn't say it was brutal today. It was 90 minutes of, if you want to call it that, end-of-term entertainment, because, of course, MPs have gone back to their constituencies or the beaches or the ski slopes, wherever they go in the Easter recess. Yes, tariffs dominated, really, but there were other subjects as well. So we had Sir Keir Starmer doing his second one of these. He did one in December. And, of course, it all kicked off with the Prime Minister being quizzed by the MP who chairs that committee, Dame Meg Hillier, about tariffs. And this was what the Prime Minister said in his response.
Trying to negotiate an arrangement which mitigates the tariffs is better. But I think more fundamentally, in answer to your question, I don't think what's happened in the last few days is a temporary passing phase. I think it's a changing world order. I think the world is changing before us as a new era.
So, not a temporary phase there, a warning, really, that the tariff turmoil could go on for some time. Now, Meg Hillier, earlier in Treasury Questions in the House of Commons, was suggesting that this is so serious that it needs a COVID-style recovery plan. And she asked about that again in the Liaison Committee meeting. This is what she said.
And in response to the banking crisis, to COVID, the state threw a lot at different parts of the system to try to make sure that these issues around potential recession and so on were mitigated. Are you planning to do anything like that? And are you looking at the rules at all? Well,
Some of the support that we put in is more in the nature of breaking down barriers that are in the way. And I think the state can and should do much more of that. So, for example, yesterday on the Z mandate, it was introducing a degree of flexibility rather than putting money behind something.
The formidable Dame Meg Hillier there, who also chairs the Treasury Select Committee. At one point, she asked Sir Keir about those rather crass remarks by, first of all, Rachel Reeves and then Darren Jones, that welfare cuts were just like taking pocket money off your children. Well, Sir Keir responded with a rather pompous phrase, "Dignity is the most important word in my dictionary." Anyway, that leads us on to welfare because, as you might imagine, a lot of Labour MPs on the committee, there are 13 MPs asking questions today, 11 of whom were Labour, one Liberal Democrat and one Conservative. Welfare cuts. First of all, we heard from the chair of the Work and Pensions Select Committee, that's Debbie Abrahams. She's a critic of the cuts. And then we heard this from the Labour MP, Sarah Owen, who chairs the Women and Equalities Committee.
I'm sure many members have had similar things, but just some samples of what's come into my inbox. I am beyond stressed with anticipation of losing money. I have £700 to live on this month. Another one, the proposed cuts to disability benefits have left me feeling full of panic about the future and extremely let down. And the last one, I feel so sick, physically sick. The whole process is horrid. Please represent me. Prime Minister, what would you say to them?
Well, I think this question of how people feel and values is really important. And that's why sort of standing back from the technicalities of any changes, the guiding principles are really important, which is those people that do need support and protection should get support and protection.
The other subject, of course, that has incensed many Labour MPs in recent weeks is the big cut in spending on overseas aid. This was the chair of the International Development Select Committee, that's Sarah Champion, putting a question to Sir Keir Starmer.
We understand the financial constraints. What is your vision for development?
Well, a healthier, thriving world where we reduce conflict and tension and corruption and ill health is the intention. Obviously, what I have to do is to balance that within the resource that we've got and at the same time recognise that we're in a new era when it comes to defence and security in Europe.
We played Boris Johnson earlier the day before he resigned at the Liaison Committee. How do you think Keir Starmer compared to previous PMs?
He's very serious. He's wooden in his answers and some would say robotic. I mean, these committees were started in 2002 when Tony Blair was Prime Minister. He'd breeze in, all smiles, jacket off, first name terms, turn on the charm. And to be fair, Boris Johnson always used to call MPs by their first names and so on. To be honest, they were better theatre when we had more theatrical Prime Ministers. I mean, you could never really describe Sir Keir Starmer as theatrical. I mean, if you want 90 minutes of pure entertainment, go to the cinema, don't go to the to watch the Liaison Committee. Because actually the stars today were those MPs like Sarah Owen and the others who were asking the questions. The PM really, I think, was just desperately trying to get through without making any gaffes, own goal. I mean, it was 90 minutes and he managed to avoid own goals, so he'll be pleased with that.
Well, if anyone can make the most of the Liaison Committee, John, it is you. So thank you so much for all of that, John Craik, our chief political correspondent. Well, the market turmoil brought about by Trump's tariffs is sure to feature heavily in tomorrow's papers. We can expect the latest news lines and not lots of analysis too. We'll have our extended press preview from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining Gillian Joseph will be the deputy editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill, alongside the journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman. Well, let's bring in our panel for this evening, shall we? Gwaine Towler, of course, former comms guru for reform, and Jim Murphy, former Scotland Secretary for the Labour Party. Thank you both very much for joining me. I don't want to feel like a broken record because we have been talking about tariffs for a long time, but this week feels like a really big week, feels like it really matters. What's your take on everything that's going on, Gwaine?
I've heard people describe it as Orange Monday yesterday, but I think what Trump has done, both in foreign policy terms and now in trade terms, he's torn aside and torn asunder many comfortable fictions about the nature of power, the nature of money, and the nature of trade. And whilst, as John was saying earlier, this is ongoing. This is not for today. It's not for tomorrow. It's going to be continuing. I think that in some ways, it's a resetting to reality. The fact is, the EU, for example, was applying many tariffs to America that America didn't reply back. And there's no doubt that Trump's been banging on about this for 20, 30 years. Long before he was involved in politics, he's been saying this. So we shouldn't be that surprised. But I do think it's a little bit hypocritical of us when we go on about how dare you. We applied tariffs to oranges. Now, I don't believe there are huge orange groves across Yorkshire or across Kent. Why are we applying tariffs ourselves to products we don't even produce? So I think much of the whole world tariff regime and trade regime is waking up to a new reality. But we have to look at our own house too.
I mean, there is a lot of uncertainty, though, isn't there, Jim? Yeah. I think there's not a total clarity of message coming out of the US.
In my time in politics, there were very few certainties, one of which was the alliance with the United States. And that no matter the circumstance, the United Kingdom would share intelligence, it would share geopolitical interests, it would share defence capabilities and be completely interoperable. And we would talk in private, frankly, and come to a conclusion as partners and allies, and take that to the United Nations, for example. And certainly that's what we had until the inauguration of President Trump the second time round. And I think Keir and the team are now trying to recalibrate what it means to have a far less reliable, much less predictable, most powerful person on the planet setting a new set of rules unilaterally, overnight, via social media, in a way that is targeted at both friend and foe alike, and that's very difficult.
And does this all come down to one man, Donald Trump? You know, we've seen this mismatch, Elon Musk calling one of his top advisors a moron today. You know, is it Donald Trump that makes these decisions? Is it one man?
I think pretty much Trump does, but he's had 4 years to build his team, and the people in his Treasury team are actually regarded, as far as I understand, as the more sane lot in his cabinet. But as I said, this is something he's been talking about for many years. We shouldn't be surprised. When you say unreliable, maybe not. I would say we think he's unpredictable. No, he's actually very predictable.
Do you think?
He said he's going to do this for decades. So why are we surprised? I think, as I say, we have become so used to our comfortable fictions that somebody turning up and saying the emperor's got no clothes is shocking to us. And it is shocking to us. We are shocked. The markets are shocked. But again, I'm not sure where their intelligence comes from, because this shouldn't be a surprise. This is not new. He's always said this.
He does seem very open to talks, certainly with Europe.
Well, it seems open to a monologue, and that's not talks. And it seems to be a monologue with a limited number of characters late at night on social media. Look, this is the type of thing that the UK government is now trying to work its way through. I'm not in government anymore, so I'm not party to how they'll do it. But I think, as a minimum, what it will do is set many of the US's long-term partners searching fresh relationships and closer connectivity. I think we will, as a consequence of this, see the UK having even closer cooperation with France, Germany, with the Baltics and the Nordics, and deepen our relationship with Japan and others as a consequence. Because we've got used to a system whereby multilateral organisations like the UN set rules and coalitions of the willing enforce the rules. And we may have to recalibrate what those coalitions of the willing look like in the future.
OK, thank you both very much. We'll come back to you very shortly. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up, we will be talking about bins in Birmingham and the ongoing bin strike that continues. We have spoken to the council leader there.
The only way to Gaza for us right now is with the Israeli military. The IDF had brought us in to show us a tunnel network under a residential neighbourhood.
The length of time it must have to have created these tunnels must have taken years.
At the end of the day, it's war at the top. It's war down here.
I'm Alistair Bungle, Sky's Middle East correspondent based here in Jerusalem. As we were filming, there was a gun battle in the next street.
This neighbourhood, the Israeli military say, was the stronghold of Hamas's Rafah brigade.
It was just after 6:30 a.m. when the first shots were fired.
I remember everything. It was a day that I don't think I'll ever be able to forget.
There's no moon, perfect conditions for smugglers and human traffickers trying to move fuel, weapons and people.
The valleys in between, they're some of the main smuggling routes.
After days of negotiation, a major smuggler here has agreed to meet us.
The families that we've spoken to of people who have died trying to cross into Europe, they say you're a murderer. Are you a murderer?
No.
Sky News, get the full story first. Begum was 15 when she left East London with 2 school friends to join Islamic State in Syria.
Do you feel that you have committed a crime to the extent that you should serve time in a British prison?
I mean, I feel like the only crime I committed was coming here.
If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. I can take the heat. The second thing that Harry Truman said, was in politics, if you want a friend, get a dog.
My children will love a dog.
In Tel Aviv, a constant streak of interceptions filled the night sky as waves of missiles came in.
It appears to be a very, very large and sustained attack on Israel.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Hello, welcome back. Now, the bitter row over bins in Birmingham is set to continue. Talks between union leaders and councillors have ended without an agreement over how to solve the city's refuse crisis. It's all after strike action has been going on, as I'm sure you'll know, for a month. Our correspondent Tom Parpenter reports.
This is what it's come to. A daily dose of disinfectant. Because the biggest rubbish pile on James's Street is right on his doorstep.
Feels like you're doing something.
It's doing something, yeah.
Yeah. He's using litres of this stuff to keep the stench at bay.
You get depressed sometimes looking at it like.
The thing that hurts him most is that they're holding his grandmother's funeral next week. The hearse won't be able to get to their house.
She was a lovely woman. She liked it here, and I'd like, to get her down here. That's it. Yeah. Mean an awful lot to me. Yeah. So I'd like to bring her back here and start the funeral from here.
But it's just not possible.
It's not going to be possible.
His neighbour Javid is registered blind and has already hurt himself simply leaving the house.
I tripped over here a couple of times and fell.
Over the rubbish?
Yeah.
How do you feel?
I feel terrible, to be honest. Because, I'm from Asian country, yeah. In the third world country, we don't have this. What we got here, yeah. This is beyond third world country.
Some rubbish is being picked up by agency workers, but the union and the city council still haven't reached a full settlement.
I understand how difficult this is for the people of the city. This is why we're very keen to get a resolution to the dispute and also why we're taking the contingency measures that we are as well.
Inside the council's meeting, a man dressed as a rat turned up to make his point.
What date does the council think it will have reduced the backlog, reduced the rat population and returned our streets to an acceptable state?
Are we going to win? Are we going to win?
While outside, the striking workers and their union say they cannot back down.
This isn't about a pay rise. This is about a pay cut of a quarter of their pay. That blame sits at the door of the council. But look, I think there's a resolution to be had. We've put that resolution forward. I really would like the council to pick that up.
Until they reach an agreement, people are stuck living with this embarrassing mess. And now the Health Secretary has said he's concerned as to the effect it's having on the people living here amongst this rubbish. It's not the first bin strike in this city, but it is fast becoming one of the worst, with residents desperate for an end to this squalor. Tom Parmenter, Sky News, Birmingham.
Right, let's bring Gwen and Jim back in. I mean, it's kind of incredible, isn't it, every day seeing these pictures of bins piling up rats. I mean, I kind of can't believe that we're still seeing this. Where do you stand on all this?
In my dim, distant memory, I can just about remember 1979 and the bin strike, and it has memories of that. But this is I wouldn't say a little local difficulty, but it's a difficulty for one city, one local authority. There were decisions made to buy off unions a while back, and that has come back to bite the council very hard, almost like a rat bite. But the fact is that it is not a national issue. It is not something for the government. It is something for the council. However, of course, the council is bankrupt. So if they're going to try and equalise the pay, which seems to be the issue here, and there are differences in unions, and Jim will be able to give you a much better idea of where the unions stand on this, the fact is that the people of Birmingham are suffering, and something has to be done. But how to cut the Gordian knot and please unite, how to also ensure that the salaries are equal, but when the jobs aren't necessarily equal, this is a much more complex issue than big rats, bad bins, just sort it.
Yeah,
There's more to it than that.
Bins matter politically. I mean, you say it's not a national issue, but people do vote on bins, don't they?
Of course they do. Potholes and bins are two of the biggest issues that come up, and clearly in Birmingham it would be bins at the moment. But the issue is more complicated than, understandably, your package can show. It goes back many years on the issue of sex discrimination and equalisation of pay between men and women. It's an issue that's run across multiple councils across the UK. It's just come to a head in Birmingham. One of the things I'm puzzled by, though, is one of the unions, the GMB, has managed to negotiate what appears to be a pretty good deal for their members, and yet Unite seems still to be out on strike. And I don't really understand why one union can get a great deal or a good deal and Unite are incapable of getting a deal. In saying all of that, this is work that the three of us probably wouldn't want to do. So I completely empathise with the bin workers who want to protect their wages, because it's unglamorous work, it's by nature dirty work. It's a type of work that is never celebrated but is always essential.
It's important, as we're seeing.
Mm.
Well, clearly, I mean, the great mounds of bins tell their own story. But
So you really think there's no... And we know Angela Rayner has been speaking to the council. You know, do you think this is going to become a national issue?
I think it is already, in a sort of PR sense, a national issue. But it is, and I almost feel that Labour now will wish that Andy Street had won the election last year. So therefore it would be a Tory problem rather than a Labour problem. So now it's a Labour problem rather than a Tory Labour problem. So the problems were created under the Tory administration, and now Labour are picking up that problem. But one hopes that the Labour administration in Birmingham has better relations with the unions than maybe the Tories would have done, but clearly not, except for the GMB. So I think it's, for most of the country, it's quite arcane, but for Birmingham, the residents of Birmingham, it's right in your face, and it does need to be sorted out. But I think there has to be give on both sides, as always in these matters. And I think that the idea that wages are being levelled down because of the basic bankruptcy of the council is a problem, particularly when you've got price rises and the cost of living crisis and energy prices and so on and so forth. Very, very hard for somebody who works. They get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, start work at 4, doing their stuff. We like to see our bin men and women gone before we leave for work. We like that all to be done. So it's a tough job, but at the same time, there's only limited budgets. There just are. So there has to be give.
Yeah. OK, thank you both. We'll come back to you very shortly. You're watching the Politics Hub coming up. The Greens are the latest party to launch their local election campaign. What message do they have? We'll take you through all the details. Hello, welcome back. Well, we're less than a month out now from polling date for the local elections, and today, the turn of the Green Party in launching their campaign. The party's co-leaders argued that voters across the country are looking for something different as they unveiled their pitch in Warwickshire and had some criticism for the government too.
We, like so many others, were hoping that the change in government would make things better after so many years of the Conservatives' cruel and short-sighted cuts to our public services. We've said all along that we'll congratulate Labour and support them where we think they're heading in the right direction, and we'll push them and call them to be more ambitious where we think they're getting it wrong. Needless to say, we've not done as much congratulating as we would have liked since they came to government.
We were hoping for some positive change, and that just isn't happening. And with every day, it's looking less and less likely that it will. Cutting the winter fuel allowance, refusing to end the two-child benefit cap, slashing benefits for disabled people. Labour are making choices that increase poverty, making things so much worse for so many people, and burdening councils with an ever-increasing demand for services on only a fraction of the financial support they need. After 14 years of failure from the Conservatives, voters are telling us that this Labour government has been a crushing disappointment, unwilling to equip councils with what they need to actually support our communities. So we know that in these local elections, where they're still happening, many people are looking for something different.
Well, our political correspondent, Serena Barker-Singh, has been watching the local election launch. The Green parties, they've each taken it in turn. What do you make of the Greens' launch today?
Well, they've been quite ambitious. They say they want to have a record number of councillors. I mean, they're a fairly small party, so they have been growing every election in terms of numbers. So they're quite comfortable ground to say that. But you had Carla Denyer and Adrian Ramsey, their co-leaders, outlining their pitch today. They have about 800 councillors. They said they help run 40 councils. So this is the kind of number that they want to build on. That seems, very likely. But more in terms of their strategy, I think is quite interesting. They clearly think that they want to capitalise on this disillusionment that people have with the two-party system. They think it's a time for small parties. And I think that is true. They called Labour's plan for change a crushing disappointment. They're clearly tapping into sentiment that Labour aren't doing super well in the polls. But that energy of smaller parties doing well isn't really translating to the Greens. If you look at Reform, for example, who have the same amount of MPs now as the Green Party, they don't seem to be having the same impact. And I think that's going to be their weakness. I mean, they did directly address that. They called they called the Reform Party a politics of fear. They said they want to be a positive party, and they said Reform shout the loudest. I think, though, ultimately, their big battle is that they're just not as popular.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, they do have pretty much the same number of MPs. What's happening in the polls? We've had some interesting polling, I think.
Yeah, so this isn't a national picture, so it's separate to the locals, but it's a good time to take stock. It's end of term, and, just recess is happening. So we've got a sense of what voters think about leaders this time. So we asked them, do you think Keir Starmer is doing well, badly, or OK as Prime Minister? Interestingly, fairly well, fairly badly, similar numbers. So 27 for fairly badly, fairly well, 25. I think the thing to watch is very badly. 33% is quite high. That's not that surprising for the ruling party. But I think what's interesting is the next thing we asked, which was which of the following would you like to be Prime Minister? Which would make a better Prime Minister? And I think Keir Starmer's at the top, 21%. That's not bad for a ruling party. Nigel Farage, 16%, perhaps not that surprising. I think the surprising thing here is Kemi Badenoch, completely bottom of the pack at 5%. That is quite shocking. And none of them is extremely high, 37%, which is probably depressingly high. Yeah. The last thing we asked them was which of the following do you think are doing the best job at offering the choice of an alternative government to the current Labour government? So again, if you think about Kemi Badenoch being at the bottom of the pile, this is even worse news for her in terms of who people think could be a good opposition. Nigel Farage and the Reform Party come quite high at 22%. And then the Conservatives aren't even second. It's Ed Davey and the Lib Dems. And just speaking about the Greens, as we have done, as they want to be the small party, not appearing in any of those, I think is quite concerning for them as well.
Yeah, really interesting. And this is obviously a national, as you say, not local picture. Not great news for Kemi Badenoch. Thank you so much, Serena Barker-Singh, our political correspondent. Now, there are calls for the government to introduce graduated driving licences. These types of licences are used across the world, and they're designed to grant new drivers road pillages in a staged format. Well, our correspondent Dan Whitehead has been to Canada, where they're already in place, and where there's been an 83% drop in teenage driver deaths. He sent us this report.
I have never driven a car, and I don't know how to even start a car.
This is Bapreet's first time behind the wheel.
Check the mirror, make sure we know what's happening behind us.
It'll be at least 20 months before she gets a full driving licence. New drivers here in Toronto learn in stages, and the tougher rules have cut deaths among 16 to 19-year-olds by 83%.
In the UK, you can do a course in 1 week and then take your test.
Wow.
What do you think about that?
Not everything is about freedom. You have to consider others as well. It's not just you driving, right? So there's other people on the road who you have to make feel safe.
It takes nearly 2 years to get a driving licence here in this part of Canada, and in that time, learner drivers can't go on the roads between midnight and 5 a.m. They can't drive with a car full of their mates. All things which have seen the number of injuries and deaths on the road fall. Maria helped to introduce graduated driving licences to Ontario in the early 90s.
It could be a passenger restriction, it could be a time of day restriction, it could be a blood alcohol or a drug concentration restriction. But, basically the idea is not to take someone who is newly licensed and say, here, go forth into this crazy, mad driving world and just let them, do or die, right? Because more often it's the die.
The system they have here is exactly what campaigners back in the UK want the government to consider. Elliot was killed when a car he was in with friends crashed into a tree at 100 miles per hour near Oxford. His sister Mia is angry the government is refusing to introduce tougher rules.
I think they're making a very irresponsible decision.
Do you think if graduated driving licences had been in place, your brother might still be here?
Absolutely, he would, yes. It makes me feel really angry and really quite disappointed and let down by our government, because he would still be here and so would hundreds of other people's sons and daughters, and it's completely changed my whole life, and I see how hurt my parents are by it, and I just need it to stop.
The government says it's not considering GDLs. It believes they unfairly penalise young drivers and is looking at other options to tackle the issue.
You have the full light package, you have the full siren package.
Back in Toronto, Superintendent Matt Moyer heads up Canada's largest road safety unit. He admits there are challenges in enforcing GDLs, but believes the system does save lives.
Come out to some of our fatals and find out why, there's 3,000 pounds of steel wrapped around this person, and yet there was never any standard applied to them. And I understand that there's some people who might believe that it's an infringement upon their rights to actually introduce laws. These aren't laws, they're standards. And the more people that will accept that and abide by that, you've just made a major contribution to public safety in Britain.
Road safety groups, MPs, bereaved families, they all want the UK government to copy what's done here. Ultimately, they believe it'll reduce deaths on Britain's roads. Dan Whitehead, Sky News.
Well, there's much more on that story on the UK Tonight. This evening, Sarah J. Mee has been speaking to road safety campaigners and parents who've lost their children in collisions involving young drivers. Right, let's bring Jim and Gawain back in. I want to talk to you a bit about the polling that I think you're watching from outside. It's not great news for Kemi Badenoch, is it, Jim? I think so. She comes fourth after Keir Starmer, Nigel Farage and Ed Davey in terms of who would make the best leader.
Comes after Don't Know. So it comes fifth, actually, in a poll when you're the opposition leader fresh in the job.
What could she do?
Do you know, I think that she lacks any sense of the nation, a narrative about the nation's future. So the only time people see Kemi Badenoch is when she is trying, but largely failing, to trip the Prime Minister up at PMQs. And actually, the truth is, Keir Starmer probably gets stronger at it every month because she is so ineffective. And there's a very little consistency in her attacks. So looking at these numbers, if I'm the government, I'm pretty satisfied with it. Of course, you'd want Keir's number to be higher than 21.
Is she in an impossible... I'm making the point because we don't have a Conservative on this evening. Is she in a very difficult position coming from a very low base?
To be fair, it's the second toughest job in politics. The Chancellor of the Exchequer currently has the toughest job, and hers is the second toughest job.
And at one moment, everyone was saying Keir Starmer, when he was leader of the opposition, there was speculation that he was going to go at one moment. So could she rise out of this?
No, she can't. I think, with a bit of historical perspective, when Blair won, week after week after week, William Hague, as the leader of the Tories, beat Blair at the dispatch.
He did, yes.
Week after week after week. Kemi's not doing that. But it didn't make a blind bit of difference in the polls. And the fact is that Labour came in a major landslide. The Tories were crushed. The country wanted rid of them. The reason why Ed Davey got 74 seats isn't because the country thought that bungee jumping was a good idea for politics. It's because they voted against the Tories. And so she inherited a poison chalice. The Tories had elected her in part because she was supposed to be a good dispatch box performer, and she clearly isn't. Or her advisors are, frankly, not up to the task. And I know that she's been sacking half her staff, and maybe that she sacked the wrong ones. And she's in a mess. And I suspect in November, when the Tories have a chance of looking at their leader again, a lot of Tory backbenchers have those folded calendars with a date in November saying, write letter to the head of the 1922 committee.
Yeah,
They're in trouble.
but to be fair to her, it is tough in the chamber. She's got 100...
People say Margaret Thatcher improved a lot.
She did. I don't think Kemi can improve. I don't think this is recoverable for her. I think, but the dynamics in the chamber count against her. If I'm the Labour Party, I'm pretty heartened by these numbers, partly because there's no election for another 4 years. We're arguably the most stable politics of any major economy in the world.
You must have some... we don't want the party love. You must have some constructive criticism.
I think what I would say is that the Labour Party will want to ensure that the next election is a choice rather than a referendum. Because incumbents all across the world want an election to be about a choice between their vision and the alternative. Governments lose when a general election is turned into a referendum. And that's the caution, I think, in these numbers for Labour.
Thank you both. I'm sorry, we really want to get to the last item. You're going to enjoy it.
Okay.
Still to come on the Politics Hub. Parliament rises for Easter recess today, so MPs are packing their suitcases and heading off for a well-earned break. But the politics of how you holiday can be a minefield, even if you don't get attacked by the locals.
Paris reverberated to the sights, sounds and smells of conflict.
There's a focal point to all this anger, and that is Emmanuel Macron.
I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels.
There are dozens of people desperately clambering to get onto that boat. It is a chaotic scene, but it's being watched by dozens of French police officers on the beach.
I've reported on migration across Europe, close up on the ground, understanding that sense of desperation and meeting the criminal gangs behind it.
This old fishing boat set off from the Libyan port of Tobruk. There were 606 people who were on board.
So we've been distributing life jackets to all the people on board this boat, and now the first person is coming on board.
This is the ugly side of Italian football.
In Italy, everything is really organized.
Football's problems with hooliganism, racism were just dormant, and now they're back and they're getting worse.
We cover so many countries, languages and cultures and work hard to gain trust to bring you the full story first.
Help is slowly reaching these places.
It's not just homes, but whole streets like this one that have been reduced to rubble and dust.
This is a picture of destruction.
Everywhere you look in this mountaintop community, there is absolute devastation.
These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life, to annex Gaza for Israel.
The least we can do is just kick them out of our land.
Gaza, which is just 2 miles in that direction, is under attack again. Getting the chance to tell people's stories, it's a privilege.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's futures.
This is an actual crime. They don't care for that. Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub. Now, today, the House of Commons breaks up for recess, and members of Parliament might be hoping for a bit of a break from all the drama of politics. But going on holiday can be a fraught business for MPs, as the past has proven. Where to go, how long to go for, when to come back if duty calls, all questions they might have to consider. And some parliamentarians might be wanting to take a leaf at the pages of previous Prime Ministers on their holiday-going style. Well, David Cameron famously chose to holiday in sunny Polseth in Cornwall when he was PM. Here he is with his wife Samantha back in 2015. Gordon Brown also chose a UK staycay for one of his summer holes, visiting Norfolk after a slightly difficult time for the party. And Theresa May taking a more active approach, heading off on an alpine trek with her husband Philip for the holes in Switzerland in the summer of 2016. A tense time, I'm sure. I think that's when people say that's when she decided to call the general election. Yeah. Didn't go that well. Right, let's bring our duo back in, shall we? Jim and Gawain. Where can ministers go on holiday? Jim?
It's increasingly difficult. In the digital, the sort of ubiquity of social media is really difficult, isn't it? I mean, I was a minister at the Foreign Office, Minister for Europe, which included minister responsible for Russia. And Russia and Georgia started a war, and I had arrived in Spain on holiday from the first day of my family holiday. Yeah, I can see the look in your face. That's the look in the face that my family had. So the Downing Street called me and said, "You've seen this." I actually saw it on Sky that it had happened. That was the first time I knew it had happened. And Downing Street called and said, you have to come back from your holiday. And I said, "Are you sure?" They said, "Well, it's either you or the Prime Minister. So which would you think makes most sense to come back on day one of the holiday?" So our holiday in Spain lasted a few hours. We all headed back. And my family have forgiven me, of course.
Great power.
They rarely remind me of
great
it.
Responsibility. Gawain, you're a PR guru.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where would you advise a party leader to go?
I mean, I do remember a time many years back when Malcolm Lord Pearson was the leader of UKIP, and he just announced at the end of the parliamentary term in the summer that he was going to go to his moor in Scotland. Mm. And there's no connection on the moor, and there's very little connection in the House. And will be away for 6 weeks, mostly stalking on his moor. And it's goes, oh, all right, so I guess I'm party leader for the next 6 weeks, and I was just the press officer. You had to deal with it. I suppose I have nostalgia for a day when politicians were actually allowed some time off. I think it's important. The pressures they're under, the huge pressures, particularly from the 24-hour media circus, actually, no. Yeah. Civil servants, no. I'm going to take some time off. I'd like to see my family.
Some people do.
You need that.
Yeah.
You need that.
Some people seem to get away with more than others. In fact, I mean, this is slightly shameless because we just want to show you this clip. We want to bring you this little video. Boris Johnson, his wife, Carrie Johnson, posted this recently on perhaps not such a relaxing outing.
Oh, Christ!
Do these sorts of videos, do they chime with the public?
There's also the one where they're on the tent somewhere in rural Scotland with the wind and rain lashing them. Look, I think people enjoy that. It's Boris Johnson. He was a circus performer in Parliament, and why shouldn't he be chewed over by an ostrich or whatever that was?
Okay.
But politicians are allowed a break, surely. They need
Thank
to
you both so much. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for. Hope you are getting a nice Easter break. See you very soon.